Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. We're back for another episode of Revival Cast, and we've got uh, Zero Mega, I think is actually the way to pronounce that.
Yep. Yeah,
Selkite
but zero's fine.
and Polaris with us. We're going to talk about the the Leston calendar system and time today. Um, but we're hunting for a date because the blog was about a day in the life of a hunter. And I know Zero got a chance to read through that. I think everybody else did. Came a little bit late yesterday, so Friday. But it was pretty interesting. We got some details about what it might be like to hunt a bear. What did you guys think?
What it might be like to get like a 1 in 300 shot on a bear, more like.
I kind of thought that was interesting. I mean, I understand that maybe for the purposes of the blog, it wasn't critical to outline, or it was easier just to have a one-shot kill. But it made me think if that isn't actually the reward for being a very skilled hunter. We have obviously a lot of suspension of disbelief in any game. So, is a sufficiently skilled enough hunter able to do that one-shot kill? And I don't see why they couldn't. I suppose for the sake of a game. And I guess hey, I'm just glad the guy found the bear and not the other way around.
And as Rose was saying in chat, he did miss the Falkirk owl. So,
Yeah,
um, but that wasn't as planned. That was kind of more spur of the moment thing. So he didn't have a lot of time to set up that shot. Where, as maybe he had more time to set up
yeah,
the shot
and
with the
and it's
bear. It
kind
was
of
just sitting there.
and it's kind of implied the owl was aware of him as well, whereas the
Yeah,
bear was kind of
right.
um, busy mowing down
Watching
on some
out.
magic, moss lichen. Sorry.
Yeah. Um, that was a little weird to me too. So one of I think um, the whole reason Augie was out there hunting in the first place was he was actually hunting for lichen and
Yeah.
not flesh. While it was out there, for a friend of his, um, but using a knife to scrape off the lichen was, I don't know. I wasn't expecting that. Oh, I'm just gonna use it to on flora instead of fauna. That's an interesting image that we typically don't see a lot of in other MMORPGs, right? You might use an axe or something against a tree, but you're
Yeah.
generally
Well,
not
it's
using a
often
knife.
pretty simple, kind of canned animation. I'm not saying that to make light of the animators, but it is. It's the axe on the or pick on the iron load or
Hmm.
the tree or what have you. That's a very simple. So the idea of it being a little bit more dynamic and having that knife use is pretty neat.
Hmm.
I do question why it's called sea moss when it's found on near the tree line on a mountain.
I
Um,
wondered that myself.
Maybe just because of color. I don't know, but
I think it's the color. Yeah.
yeah. And of course, then that's the other easy thing to diverge on or be distracted by is what makes it so special.
Yes, so this is an interesting point that it says that aside from the more obvious commodities like furs and meat, hunters also like to keep the wilds a little less wild, which gives us a little bit more of a um, in-game reasoning for being out there and killing a bunch of stuff constantly. At
Hmm.
least it makes you feel like you're doing a service. When I was a druid in vanilla EverQuest, it used to frustrate me to no end that I couldn't clean up the dead corpses that people would leave lying around in the
Hmm.
wilderness. They'd leave because they would stay there for days, if not
Oh wow.
over a week. And I'm a druid in the forest, thinking I'd like to bury these corpses or do something with them instead of just leaving them lying around for days and weeks, must maybe even have
That's
been
why I
months
rolled
in
the
DQ
butchering
time.
skill in World of Warcraft so I could clean up the mess.
Right. Ugh. Um, so I like that we have that kind of built in maybe already, and maybe we'll be able to do a little bit more of that if people are leaving corpses. Maybe we will have a chance to clean them up. Um,
Although it will be kind of interesting because without the if that I should say it will be interesting to see if that even becomes an issue because with the scarcity of resources and with the lack of trash loot. I mean, the fact that if you kill an animal, it's got useful componentry on it. Will people even buy? I mean, will that just become the standard thing? You kill something, you're going to harvest it as much as you can.
yeah, because we've got skinning, we've got butchering as skills, so hopefully those will be incentives for people to clean up after themselves. It was a little strange that he was able to stuff so much into his pack.
Well, he didn't really. Yeah, I mean, and again, I kind of had the same thought as like, I wonder how much he could because he carries the bear hide, if nothing else. That's not a small amount of material, but again, balance of game and simulation, I suppose. But it did make me wonder because it mentions that he also basically foregoes sleep to do so. Is there a kind of cumulative effect between him carrying that additional burden, possible altitude issues, and then the fact that he didn't sleep? I mean, does that have any role on his effectiveness as a character? Is he slower, or is there any kind of, I guess, sleep deprivation effect that that'll exist for him?
Mhm.
Yeah, he definitely seemed to want to hightail it off the mountain.
Yeah, so would I if I was in a bear-infested mountain, though, to be fair.
I mean,
Uh-huh.
I was
With
kind
no
of
sleep, carrying a load. Yeah.
yeah, I was wondering. He seemed to be cool with camping out in the open, and I've been playing Darkest Dungeon. Um, so I was a little concerned about camping by himself and what happens if he gets ambushed in some fashion, because that happens in Darkest Dungeon. Um, so I was feeling a little antsy just with him being by himself, and like, yeah, I guess I just camp out. It didn't seem like he took super extra precautions to make sure that nothing came at him in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and there's a couple things. I mean, just kind of as a short list. And again, sorry that it's a little bit disjointed. I was pretty busy last week, so I literally did just only read this like I don't know, maybe an hour now before we started. So um, there's some little nods in there towards extra information. For instance, he mentioned that the feathers off that owl would have been, would have covered a trip to the market for him. So clearly, value in owl feathers. I don't know if they're used for like fletching or something similar, but so we know value in owls. At the end, he mentions that maybe he'll make his friend who's a tailor, use that bear hide into a cloak. So we know that that is a resource conversion that exists. Um, One of the ones that was actually two things that kind of stood out to me also were the blog you mentioned. So Augie wakes up, he hears a noise, or he doesn't wake up, sorry, he hears a noise and he gets up and he places himself with the fire behind him. Now, this
Yes.
strategically makes sense, but in terms of a game, is that actually something that will matter? If I'm if it's whether it's a bear or another player, if it's pitch black outside, it's nighttime, and I place a bright source of illumination behind me, does that other player or mob suffer a visibility penalty because of that effect? Or is it just theatrics for the sake of the blog?
Hmm. We know there's some visibility
Oh, and Extra
mechanics.
Snipe just
Nice. That's cool to know.
it will matter.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
because we've
Dig
been
it.
hearing about that line of sight. It's about what the character is capable of seeing, not what the player is capable of seeing. So um, I could see how that could cause an effect, yeah,
Yeah.
on visibility for
I
what
mean,
the
I think
character
it's
is seeing.
so. I think the reason that Augie tries to get the fire out of his line of sight is just to improve his own vision. But I don't think a bear or another player looking at him would necessarily have poor vision of him just because of that, right? Like assuming that he's in between the other person or animal and the fire, right, and not like really low, to try to get himself in the shadow or whatever. Like obviously you cast a silhouette, and obviously silhouettes are very easy to recognize.
They
Now,
are,
I
but it
mean,
does obscure detail.
true, true, but you still know that something's there,
Yeah,
right?
fair point. Fair point.
Yeah. Whereas if the fire is between you and them, right, obviously it becomes a much more different thing. I mean, you can chill on the edge of, you know, the strong part of firelight and be, really hard to see to someone who's sitting right at the fire,
Yeah.
especially if you're on the other side. Um, I go camping a lot. I know this. I like to scare people, but yeah, the pragmatically speaking, you'd still a bear would still know that there's something there. And in fact, I'm a little surprised the bear in this case. I mean, we're not given information about the wind or anything, right? But I'm a little surprised that the bear was hunting lichen. I, for one, did not know that black bears or mountain bears or similar things ate lichen, and I guess it's fine to make that happen in revival anyway. But I was like, oh, I wonder why the bear wants lichen over his rations, which it can probably smell. You know, especially since he doesn't have a bear bag anywhere
Because
to try
magic
to.
lichen.
Right, because magic lichen, because he can't hang up his rations anywhere. He's at least at or above the tree line, so he'd have to go back, away from where he is to put his rations up. So obviously, if a bear's interested, it's going to come right at him. But hey, no worries. It's a story.
Um, and the only other thing that kind of really stood out to me too was just he talked to that Felkirk herbalist.
Hmm.
Did anyone get the impression that was an NPC or a player? And if it was an NPC, it just made me wonder. There's kind of a indication that it took a fair amount of effort for him to get that information. So I guess it just, again, is if it's an NPC, it still gives another
Yes.
kind of hint towards
I
the.
thought that was a storyteller.
Okay, yeah, I mean, and it definitely gives a hint towards the potential complexity, I guess, of interaction with NPCs. So, because obviously we're used to NPCs just with the quest marker over their head, and there's some magic lichen, go get it.
And especially interesting that it takes a while to figure out the name. We're not used to.
Mhm.
I mean, all the NPCs have a name usually, so
Yeah,
um, that's an interesting bit of information to be reluctant to share. Um, but yeah, I mean, the other thing I guess with the campfire is if he's got an arrow knocked, he's not going to want to shoot between. He's not going to want to shoot between the campfire and the.
that would make sense too. Yeah.
I don't
Um,
know. I mean, like just shooting an arrow over a fire won't really screw up the flight trajectory of the
Depends
arrow.
on. I keep imagining bonfire for some reason.
Actually, no.
Okay.
That's true. I kind of keep picturing a bonfire for some reason in my head too. I guess
But
that's
it's a
because I,
campfire.
well, I despite living in Alaska, I don't actually go camping a lot. So when I do, it's you bonfire or bust, man.
No,
You
it's
know?
it's very likely it's not designed to be a permanent fire with a pit. It's just on like a little patch of dirt or clearing or whatever. It's very probable that it's small enough to cook whatever rations he has, and then just provide him heat if it's cold. But even then, it didn't seem like it was super chilly, or at least there was no mention made of it. So I wouldn't expect it to be, a fire that's intended to give heat. I'm guessing it was just a standard, well,
Yeah,
I don't
that's
actually know what kind of fire is
But it
standard in revival, but just a standard either cabin fire or you know a TP kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right. Yeah, again, for some reason, I picture bonfire and with digs on that one. I just big roaring fire because fire. I don't know. I don't have a good reason for this.
No, just because he moves with the fire behind him makes it seem like the fire is strong enough that there's a reason
Yeah, and I think that's
for it to
kind
be
of where
behind. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Um,
if you're in the dark at night, even lighting up a cigarette will screw over your night vision for like at least a couple minutes. Just from part of that has to do with the color of the light, but generally speaking, right? Like it doesn't take a lot of light to mess with your night vision. Um,
yeah.
and adaptive exposure kind of thing applies still. Um, so yeah, but either way, I think it's fair to think like, oh, it's a big fire. But personally, I wouldn't guess at that. I think it was probably pretty small.
So, but yeah, I thought it was a neat blog, and I think it was actually pretty interesting. So we know that a hunting uh, will have reasons beyond just level grinding, which we know there's no levels, but I mean there'll be reasons for a player who would choose to maybe just dedicate themselves to to this art of hunting, which I think is really really pretty cool. And it could, I guess, if enough people do that, that would probably be an easy or maybe not. I shouldn't say easy. Maybe the more realistic segue into the first player, trading post into towns, into or villages, towns, potential cities of enough hunters, start working in areas, start trading, closer to it. I mean, that's kind of where I see player towns, being starting those and like maybe mining camps and the like.
Yeah, it's still interesting to me because he's concerned about filling up his packs with the sea lichen, but then he brings back meat and he brings back the fur. It just seems like that.
Well, he
that-
says he could have taken all of the lichen, but he wanted to leave room in his pack.
right. But
So
then
apparently
for a
there's
bear,
room enough for
a
the
bear.
stuff. Yeah.
I mean, that still just seems like a lot. I don't want to fill up my pack with lichen. I want some room, but ooh, look, I can bring back bear meat and enough fur to make a bear skin. That's
Yeah,
that's
and yeah, and it's part of a bear. We don't we he took what he could carry, I suppose, but yeah, he clearly didn't take the whole thing.
Well, I mean, you can carry a fur on the outside of your pack, right? Like, assuming you have some twiner string and you actually, skinned it properly. Like, there's not going to
or
be any bone structure
hell, he could have
unless,
just wrap the thing inside
yeah,
out.
tie it up like a camp roll and
Yeah.
just, attach it to the top or bottom of your pack, and you'd still have space for his meat and stuff. But yeah, he seems to have large bags. Because I don't really know how he's carrying all that he's carrying, especially because it sounds like he'd need to, it was more than at least a day or two's trip since he was going to be living off of the bear meat instead of his
Right.
rations. So
Well, and he bought a week's worth of rations.
true, right? So he's got to have like, well, a large pack, but still like, it's a
Yeah.
lot.
But
It's a
again,
lot of stuff.
it is kind of up in the air how much he really took, though. I mean, he could have only taken maybe a pound of actual meat with him, or maybe a couple. That wouldn't really take up that much space, and
True, true.
and he could have taken the hide with him and left everything else. So I think it's pretty open still to how much he actually took.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the telling of the story. It's in the telling
Yes.
of the story, right?
Yeah, none of this is criticism. It's just music.
Yeah, exactly. It's
I think it's
hunting
great though
stance.
that it's produced a lot of spitballing and theory crafting. It's great.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. What will you try to bring some kind of pack animal with you to help you carry things? How much? What level of camping skills will you want? Camping and cooking skills will you want to have along with you when you're going out into the wilderness?
Well, I think yeah, I think he mentioned there's a couple little things. He marks it on his map, so while that doesn't necessarily imply cartography, at the very least there's a basic player skill there for them to do that. And the cartography blog's a little bit blurry to me, so I can't recall. And I obviously he can build a campfire, and he can skin a bear and otherwise butcher it. So there's survival trades, and we'll probably see similar. I don't want to call them like skill sets, but there's kind of similar
Yeah.
skill
Yeah.
picks that hunters will probably all revolve around, and maybe they'll be more specialized in one area or another. But I suspect that either way we'll see kind of similar things. I nominate Donut. I know he's out there. I think he should just go out into the wilderness and as soon as it's available and just find out for us how it works. And
Well, Calidora has just come back from bow hunting, just in time to give us some tips on how and where that one shot might have been placed. She posted some
that's
pictures
true.
of
Yeah.
the good places to hit the bear on the side, right? Kind of, I want to. It's right below the foreleg, I guess, on the side the heart would be on is a good spot that she's saying, and I guess maybe that's targets, practice targets. Have that kind of outlined for bow hunting, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they
Hoping
did.
that you'll kind of go through the ribs and hit the heart or the lungs. Um, and then she's got one that's from the front, but trying to go right through the sternum. Well, or I guess probably right beneath the sternum. Um, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, Calidora
Yeah,
is going to be on with us next week, by the way, with Cadron to discuss housing.
yeah,
So
it'd be a good one.
Yeah.
I hope that will be a lot of fun. Um, so let's move on to this calendar system. Like I said, I was hoping we could tie that into Valentine's Day a little bit more deeply. One of the things that I'm kind of looking forward to, and there is a thread on this from several weeks ago, is I kind of enjoy having um, holidays, real life holidays, have some reflection in the world. Um, we have had this the Leston calendar. Let me see if I can grab the link to it for a while, but it's more filled out than the last time I saw it. So it had seemed like we did not have what I guess would be names for the months.
Yeah, I remember
Um,
when it was first brought up, and it was in Founder Chat shortly after I joined.
It
They
was
kind of
mostly
brought up
empty.
looking for some extra names and ideas for the months, and that's kind of what really introduced me to the calendar and seasonal differences that Elliston has as a
oops.
whole. And I still, my brain still breaks a little bit trying to wrap my head around it. And I think it's just because I think it's simpler than I'm making it out to be in my head. So
Yeah, well, Blood Dragon was saying most of the months are in place, but now all of the months are in place and seem to be set. I thought
So,
that.
so actually, I'll explain what happened there. Basically, I don't know when, but I guess like sometime in November, Alma finished actually naming all the months, but he didn't
okay,
fill in the chart, right? So the first year of the common calendar was filled out, but then the other two hadn't been copied through. So I actually just went this morning and filled out
Oh,
the other
okay.
oh,
2 years. Um,
So,
go
because I
you.
thought that is Umbwa in chat? I haven't been paying
yeah, he
attention.
Yes, he
is.
is.
And so, are they okay? So they're all set, and they do flow through all of the seasons in the same way. I thought there were still maybe some that were not named, like it wasn't consistent all the way through, but it looks like it is. Okay, that
Yeah.
makes more sense.
There are things that change, but the months themselves have standardized, regular names, right? So, yeah. So basically, the correspondence on the calendar is kind of weird, right? So the approximate time difference, or the time ratio for in-game to real time is approximately. It's a little
Pi.
over 3. Well, yeah. Okay. So it's approximately pi to 1, which is hilarious because it's irrational and ridiculous, right? But, and all sorts of fun. So the cycles are going to get weird as shit eventually, but. The correspondence is a little over 3 to 1 as far as raw time goes. However, Omba has and Snipe have elected to have essentially the climatic correspondence be effectively the same with Earth, right? The thing that happens, right, is that obviously, the seasons, if you will, and the years as marked do not correspond, therefore, at least not, you know, nicely the way that we experience it on Earth. Um, so if I see that a bunch of people are now open the doc, so more or less what happens is, and I don't know if we can actually put this on cam. I don't know, but basically, you can, instead of thinking about Celestin months, you can look at it entirely as the Julian calendar, right? So basically, all of the seasons as we know them have corresponding names in Thalson, right? So like basically the first, you know, March, April, May, it's listed in the doc, are all spring, right? And there's a pattern of new, high, and old or old um, for each season, right? So the first month of, or the calendar, right, or our real year here being March. would be new spring, April would be high spring, May would be old spring, and that's all related to just the climate. And then it's basically the rhythm is offset, but it's actually not too hard if you just try to keep the climatic time and the year time separate in your head, because that's basically the only thing that's different. Is there's just two different cycles going on, whereas on Earth, right, it's just one because of the way that we have things set up. Without going into super ridiculous like astronomy shit, then it gets really stupid. It gets super stupid, fun but stupid. Very
and then we have their weeks. It's 3 10 days basically instead of 4 weeks of 7, which is a little interesting too. So
still 7.
Still 7 what?
Still 7 days per Thelestonian week.
Well, I think
or did I miss an update somewhere?
I think that's what kept kind of messing with me, was the concept of it still having the same number of days in a year, if I recall.
It does.
But then, and I think it was just kind of the fact that it was so broken out. I was trying to figure out how you could have 365 days a year.
New Spring only has 3 parts to it, so it can't be 7 days. It's got to be 10 days, right?
So
Snipe was saying in chat, every Earth month is a season for a Thelestonian season. So
yes.
And it's broken into 3.
So
right, but inside an individual month. So basically a Thelestonian year would start in New Spring and end just before High Summer, right? So through one progression of the Thelestonian seasons, there are 3 years approximately. But each individual month of, say, Synodon or Nemesis or Demon or Homeward, etc., within them still have approximately, 4, at least as far as I know. Snipe might want to update this because I don't know for sure if this is the case. Have approximately 4 weeks of 7 days, and if you look below the calendar part, it actually lists what the days of the week are according to the. But
I don't. I see 3. You've got Snowden, Namaiti, and Demon in New Spring. That's 3.
3 months. Yes, there's 3 months.
I
Those are all months, not weeks.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
So if I were to open up another tab in there, I could break that down into 7 days.
I got you. It's 3 weeks for us.
Okay, so it's really just kind of real world player time versus the actual game world time.
Which is why I'd say keep the climate on one side, that's real time. Keep the calendar on the other.
So I'm gonna jump ahead a couple of blogs and not blogs, a couple of threads, instead of going kind of chronologically to when they appeared, and go to the latest one, which is the directions, clocks, and calendars one. People have been saying in there that it breaks immersion to have the UE help us out with the lesson time versus real time, and I think this tells us that we're going to need a UE.
Well, and
help us keep track.
There are limits to immersion. We need a UE. Period. If you guys want to run around with nothing and just try to button mash until you figure things out, fine. Hardcore server, go. But otherwise, I need something, people.
Yeah.
So, I think Serbit, you actually suggested towards the end of the current state of that thread to have essentially like a dead reckoning thing where, it's approximately, especially if you don't have a look at the sun, right? It's it's probably about, or if you don't have a more accurate thing, you could be like, /time, and your character would say it's probably about, late afternoon right now. So you don't get like a specific in-world time, but you would get, approximately what the day is like in-world, right? I don't strictly see a problem with having like a real-world time clock on the UI, especially if you can toggle it off, just because like it's useful, right? Especially if people don't necessarily have hours and hours to spend continuously in the game. Like if they have to, if they're on, a little bit of a break or something, right? And they've got, or, it's a weekend or something and they've got like an appointment to get to at 3 o'clock or something, right? Real world time, but they can still play for an hour and a half, right? It's still useful for them to have the time to reference, right? I mean, or set a thing on your phone, but it's
They should
just, it's,
probably get one of these.
shh, that's, why would you ever look at your wrist when you're playing video games, man?
My wrist is like right in front of my face. My keyboard, man.
Yep. But
Fine, Zero. You're
I
too
was
practical, man.
I was thinking the exact same thing. That's when we think about features we would love to have for mobile. I would love to have the calendar um,
That'd be kind of cool.
on
That'd be
mobile, and it would be, since I'm getting Discord notifications and Twitter notifications, it would be kind of cool. Somebody asked about, um, and I think it was in this thread. Somebody was asking about what happens if you're trying to remember that you're going on an expedition at a certain time, and translating that. I would love for that to ping on my phone. Hey, it's time for this expedition. It's coming up. Log in. Expedition starts in 1 hour, something like that. I would love for that to ping on my phone. Um, Anybody else? How much of a problem do you guys have going back and forth between real time and in-game time? Do you like to try and keep that mostly separate, or do
Do
you
you
like?
just mean personally, or do you mean with
Yeah,
regards to
personally.
like? I don't mind it. I mean, I'm willing to sort of do the approximate math, right? Or just disregard it. I mean, as far as I mean, I can sort of get away with that because, like, by all rights, the character I intend to play will not particularly care too much about punctuality. I mean, I'll personally care about being punctual if I promise to, like, a human being that I'm going to be somewhere, but, like, for the in-world concerns, I don't necessarily care too much about punctuality. Um, so I'm willing to sort of disregard it, but I understand that if people are trying to run tighter operations, or things involving shipping and other logistics that actually depend on time and the keeping of, um, I don't think it would be bad for them to have tools, right? Like, I think so. I think it was maybe Auntie had suggested that if there, or maybe it was Snipe Hunter actually, who was talking about how, like, clocks and stuff would basically work like a time command, right? And if you interacted with the clock, it would say it's right now on Brogswith of blah blah blah,
Yeah.
which I think is fine, right? Like, because time is so involved in the game, I think it's okay to make certain concessions for the usability of it, and let the strict immersion fall a little bit to the side, especially just because time sense is one of, like, those weird things that's just like, you know,
Yeah.
it either
And
makes sense right now or it doesn't. And so I think it's okay to have that kind of concession for usability um, uh, over raw immersion. And of course, you can just turn the usability features off if you really wanted to do it.
yeah, or if there's means in place for you to gather or gain a more accurate timekeeping. If they want that level of immersion, they say, okay, everyone gets a very loose, like Serp suggested, slash time, what is a rough approximation of time. As long as there's a tool in game where I can then go purchase an actual watch or clock, or somewhere there is some method. Maybe every city has some official watch or clock tower, whatever it may be. I mean, if there's something in game that I can pivot off of, that would be fine too. But I agree. Otherwise, I think there has to be at least some concession to um, just player convenience.
Yeah.
Again, we're so simulation heavy on so many things. There's other areas where I think you can just
Well,
downplay
but
it a bit for the sake
there's going to
of
be
ease.
stuff in the UI for lots of stuff, right? Health and probably stress and probably madness is what I mean, I guess. Spirit madness, um, because we don't have pain meters, we don't have time sense. I mean, we'd have actual hunger pains or sleepiness, or we'd have other measures that we'd be using to gauge time to some degree in real life that we are not going to have it all in game. So we need something to kind of help us along, because it's way too easy since we're so far, since the scale is so far off. it's going to be easy to stay up for 3 days, right? Or
Yes.
2 days or something like that of the less than time.
I mean, with the whole emphasis on immersion, then we need a way to check it.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. Or either that, or I will buy a clock and I'll put it by my computer so that I can see what time it is. So that now's when I need to get up and go to work, or now's when I need to go to bed, or just
Yeah, or someone will Shanghai Snipe Hunter's clock app code thing that he has floating around, and just use that as like a an overroll for some kind of thing, right? Where you just have it on your
right.
hard drawn onto your computer UI instead, just because it's more useful. But
I think it was Lethality who suggested maybe they could just have a sundial somewhere in the middle of town. But even that, I think that's hard pressed character wise to expect that I'm going to be crafting for who knows how long, and then I'm going to have to try and leave at some point to go out and check this, walk through to the center of town to check a sundial, like a clock tower, possibly. But even if you're on the wrong side of the tenement, eh, that's a lot of effort to try and get visibility of a clock tower. Or and there's suggestions going through from Ombwa, and I think Snipe has suggested them too, water clocks and candles, and it's water clocks and, well, hourglasses, I guess, are kind of
and even to a certain extent, bell ringing.
Yeah. Although I don't know how well bell ringing is going to work when we're in our homes. I guess there's a way to make that work.
Yeah, I mean, especially if there's not much in the way of insulation. Like, I think it's believable that you'd be able to hear.
Yeah.
There's bad. We don't have double pane glass and super cool insulation and shit. So I think it's reasonable to have there be a background, no, kind of thing going on. Especially if you live, in Nikon Street or something, right? where you'll definitely hear the clock or the bell going off whenever it does.
So I'm just going to read a little bit of the chat. Blood Dragon was mentioning that there's a note in the calendar doc that says these were named by Synod of Anamayans, Brogans, and Nodesians, no Halathi, Sirith, or Dino, different culture. And Ombwa says there were delegates from the Felkirk faiths as well. I guess maybe some of those, but the names are, as you said, maybe they just didn't go in. I'm kind of hoping that we get a different Falkirk calendar, maybe a different calendar used by the Garavi tribes, and I did outline that in a thread a while ago, and Ombwa said he did take some notes on that. So I hope we'll find some other cultures that aren't using this particular calendar. And I don't know if I asked, do you guys like to have real world holidays reflected in games like this?
I think it's fun, and I guess I've kind of just been institutionalized to it. I'm used to it, but I don't. It's on one hand, immersion. I want it. I like it just as much as the next person. Some people actually want more, I suppose. But I kind of like them. I think they're fun. I don't think they detract a whole lot, but I could see in a game like Revival where that might actually be a bit too much of a immersion breaking, I guess, event.
Yeah,
I think it's.
Or go ahead, Polaris.
I think it's probably more work for Ombwa and his team, but I'd like to see festivals and events and stuff like that that's all Telestonian, that it's all about the game and the game's events, and they may or may not coincide with real life events for us, but that there's stuff to celebrate. There's maypole kinds of reasons to do things in August or whenever. But that they're relevant to Revival and not to real life.
Yeah. Faye was saying that in chat. Regular holidays can relate to be reflected in game, but they don't have to be the winter solstice. So yeah, they don't have to be a direct analog. But I agree, Polaris and Faye. Something would be fun.
Yeah, I mean, like I thought it was cute, when I was playing World of Warcraft or whatever, and like I had the little calendar thing. I'm like, wait, whoa, it's Wintervale, cool, right? But now for something like Revival,
Yeah.
I really wouldn't want it. Like I think it's like I understand why the climate syncs up the way it does, right? For just practical use of the game by people, but like even then, if I could have my way, I'd prefer the climate to not be synced to the real world climate, in a astronomical sense, and have it just be entirely its own ecosystem. Um, and I just if I really want something Christmassy, I'll just put on some Christmas music in the background, right? Or I'll go play Starbound if it's winter, because Starbound is an amazing game to play in winter, or something like that, right? Like if I really want a slice of that, personally, I'll just go get it. I don't necessarily want it to have an over large impact um, in the game specifically for something like Revival. And the other issue is that knowing Omva, he'd probably want to be putting in a lot more than just the standard kind of, canon of American holidays, right? We'd be looking at, the Festival of Lights and stuff. We'd be looking at all sorts of things more than just, the standard Western set of stuff, which I think would be, one, cool, but I don't find it practical. So I'd rather just have stuff that's of the world, like Polaris, and makes sense to it, right? And of course, these things don't necessarily have to be on an annual basis, right?
Yeah.
There are things on Earth that happen every other and every couple of years, right? I think it's just fine to have things that are super annual.
Snipe was kind of saying, consider if you fight off a siege or a plague is magically cured by a saint and the figure, those days will be remembered locally, and that makes sense too. They get woven into the world. We talked about, I think you guys were there for it, in an IRC maybe a month ago. The Serb was talking about how families kind of prep for the dead and the return, things like that. And one of the things that came up was we talked about maybe there'd be like a festival, something they kind of establish. If we haven't seen family members come back by X date, then we celebrate that. So things like that would be kind of a neat. I guess not. I don't want to say festivals, but some events. I guess that would be relevant to the world. But yeah, I like I said, I agree. I like them traditionally, but I think in Revival they don't quite fit.
So, things that I had mentioned that I would like to see, because I like having the synergy between real life and in game. But I would like to see more things like, instead of fireworks being for 4th of July, maybe they could be for Chinese New Year. We have this mask making skill in the game, so that could be good around the same time as Halloween, but it also might be good around the same time as Mardi Gras. But with this idea that Snipe Hunter mentions of events starting to be celebrated based on what actually does happen in game, like the end of a plague, or maybe defeating a goo or an outer god, or banishing one, or something like that, celebrating these actual events. Because I was partially thinking of like Bonfire for now I forget when they have it. What's the name of the guy that's also in October? It's English. Guy
What, Sam
Fawkes Day.
Hain?
Guy Fawkes Day, maybe.
Oh, Guy Fawkes Day. Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but if we
Not Sam
if
Hain.
we have a similar thing for an event that happens in game, what happens to the holidays on different servers? Like similar holidays, but they happen at different points in the year because the events happened at different points
Or they
in
just
the
don't
year.
have them. I think
Well,
that's
all of that. I'm just saying it doesn't happen until right. You're not going to celebrate until the event happens.
I think that's fine. I mean,
Um,
But
assuming
yeah, I
that
mean
the
that's kind of
systems,
that whole.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Sal.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that the systems can actually make note of things, in a way that would let them perpetuate like that. I think it's just fine for servers to have different kind of celebrations.
Yeah.
If only because I think it makes a certain kind of server character or a server bonding, if you will, right? Which is not necessarily super important, especially if there's not like World v World or anything like that. But I think it's cool, right? You know, you can go to another server one day to visit your friend and be like, "Whoa, you guys are partying today!" Like on our world, this is like you know a shitty dour day where everyone does their taxes. Man, this is fucking cool. I'm gonna hang out here every year, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know that that's super important in revival because there are already trends pointing towards server identity anyway so far. But,
Yeah, I think the holiday thing raises some questions for me, just in general, as does pie time and the way that the seasons are laid out. I mean, some of that is logistical in terms of like, okay, so how long is winter really? And how long does an event last? And how long is summer? I mean, are we going to have a drought because summer lasts 9 months? I mean, just questions like that.
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's actually really interesting as well, though it's not something I'm actually worried about. So, depending on how you look at the astronomy, either Celestin has a really fucked up axial tilt, or it has a really fucked up precession of the axis. It kind of depends.
Well, that's what I kind of figured it was it's just it's rotated on its axis a lot slower or something.
Well, it would have to actually be faster to do the climatic shit that happens with it. But because actually, like the Earth's precession of the axis doesn't really play a big part in seasonal change. It's just the tilt, right? But for like a super, like, because the year is still solar, I think, right? I'm assuming it's still a solar year. It's the okay, so it's the precession. Yeah, basically, the world has to be wobbling really fucking fast in order for both the time around the sun and the seasons to align like they do. Which is actually kind of interesting because there's some play with that where you can make it so that the reason that the world tilts and spins so fast is because of the cataclysm bullshit that happened
Sure.
500, 600, years ago. So I think there's actually some fun story stuff to be mined out of that. But
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think of like weather systems where you have 9 months of summer, okay, so there have to be compensating weather systems to work with balancing out 9 months of potential drought to having some water somewhere to you know what I mean? Otherwise,
Well, if you have 9 months of winter and depending on your regional snowfall, you might still be okay.
yeah,
Well, so
it just makes it kind of
also-
interesting.
I mean, 9 months of
the-
winter sounds perfectly normal to me.
So I think the real question is actually whether the fauna and flora of Felsman are evolved or adapted towards the solar tendency or the climatic tendency, right? Because if they adapt towards the seasonal tendency, then it'll just everything will be the same. It'll just take longer, which would then mean you have presumably a lot larger. Well, the infrastructure would actually get really funny because then in order to grow enough food, like you'd have almost 3/4 of a year dedicated just to planting and growing food, and then you'd need that food to last for like approximately 2 years of
Yes.
at least as far as flora goes, right? Crops.
That's the kind of stuff I think about.
But that even then, I mean, if you have long growing periods, especially, you would think that at some point they would take advantage of that multiple growing, periods, multiple ways to rotate through crops, things like that. I mean,
And multiple storage facilities.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe they're experts. They've just naturally gotten good at food preservation. It's all interesting, kind of backfilling of the world story, but it's one of those things where conceptually, I just they're still alive, so clearly they figured out how to handle it.
Yeah,
They haven't gone extinct yet, so they know how to deal with it.
Plot twist: during famine, everyone is slightly leeching ether off of the ley lines to sustain them longer than they think they're being sustained. Which, of
And
course, amplifies their suffering because they're hungry for longer.
are there crops that thrive on snow and winter?
I mean, you
Uh,
can do evergreen stuff.
I'm
uh,
kind
Like
of
on
guessing
Earth,
that
like there
Sky
are,
Pass will have greenhouses.
or
That sounds like
mushrooms,
magic to me.
or
Nope.
ha
mushrooms.
ha 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 ha.
There, because I mean, assuming
Growing
assuming
plants
Sky
in the winter.
Pass, assuming
Are we
Sky Pass
talking
has
about
access to
magic
like,
mushrooms? Is that what I heard?
I wasn't,
well,
but
there's the lichens
Yeah, magic lichen. Maybe they become masters at.
over
there
in
you go.
over in River's Head and stuff. So who knows? But yeah, there are. I mean, assuming there's even some sort of cave system, like mushrooms can grow pretty heartily in all sorts of environments. So it might be possible that there's a high mushroom diet of different kinds in somewhere like Sky Pass. But again, this is kind of for Almwa to really flesh out and decide what he wants to do there because he has the framework.
Yeah.
Right now
Um,
Snipe Hunter can tell him exactly what time of day it is. In Delliston, but finding a way for people to subsist over time is going to be, I think, a fun challenge for him.
I think
Uh,
it's going to really enrich the world and
Yes.
our characters because the development of certain kinds of skills are going to make a lot of sense in a world that has 9 months of anything.
Yep. Yep. For sure.
Almost said in chat, high winter in Sky Pass is a cold friggin' day. And there is a freshwater sea on Anacatha Lake.
Yep. All the more reason I want to get one of my characters out there. It's fertile fields, a giant freshwater lake. There's got to be a reason that there's what destroyed that civilization and what's left. I have to see it.
It's that conflict, man. That conflict that was alluded to just barely by Omva in the
Yeah.
And maybe I'll get a character, run him, out, just gear up, run out that way, and if he dies, then I'll try to find the right exit on the way through Anime's realm to get that little bit step closer. Aggregated corpse running.
Um, Polaris is asking for a chat log. I'm gonna have to push Valix to help us with that if I see him again in the next week or so. Um, yeah, Snipe Hunter says harvests are a big deal in spring, though. That's when you know if your kids are going to grow up to be adults, but we don't have kids growing up to be adults in Revival, as far as
Well,
I know.
we don't, but
NPCs do.
NPCs do. Yeah.
Are they going to grow into adults?
I don't see why they wouldn't, especially when you can use that as such a potent source of like story, right? Like you're a teen and you have a really good winter, right? And then someone comes through, takes all your grain and shit, and now you're mad and you're pissed, and you go through your standard "I'm gonna avenge my parents" bullshit storyline. Like, dude, it's right there. It's right there. You can write at least 300 characters
I
off
don't
of
know.
that one trope. Come on, dude.
That seems like a terrible existence for the children of Elliston. I mean, it's like, oh, sorry, the
It's a
harvest
rough
was
world
bad.
out there.
The harvest was bad this year. You're all going to die of starvation slowly, but then you're going to probably come back and die of starvation some more, and then you might be able to come back a couple more times and die of starvation again. Just
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe starvation takes a larger toll on your soul than some other type of death because of the psychological impact. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
Umwa says greenhouses in Sky Pass are a certainty. They also have geothermal heat in some places in the city, but not everywhere.
ooh, hot.
wow.
That's kicking.
Yeah.
Lots of saunas. No magic, but other ways to relax.
Well, right, because otherwise we can't be Donnie styling in our hot tubs
That's right.
without the geothermal heating for our baths. So Snipe
Is
Hunter's
this
looking
Roman
at,
public bathhouse?
I guess, or
Sky Pass public
Sky
bathhouse.
Pass public bathhouse.
Party
yeah.
Match?
Right, I guess, yeah. Let's go to the actually it's kind of funny because that would be really weird. Turkish baths or something. Fucking I'd laugh. I'd giggle, I'd chortle. I'd be all over that.
Snipe was saying, I think it was Snipe, that we got to cycle those NPCs so that it feels like time passes too. But I think that's from 18 to 60, right? It's from 18 to 60. It's not from 5 to 60. It's my understanding. Ombwa says you don't poof into adults, maybe. So there's no poofters in Revival? I thought there were, but we'll see.
Characters poof in player characters poof in at 18 with our
Yeah.
backstory from the Origin Matrix. But I guess
Yes.
But I mean that kind of ties back into the discussion from a while back now when we talked about NPC children and whether murderizing them would be acceptable. I mean, so clearly we knew that children were planned to be around in an NPC format.
And yeah, Umbwa likes the idea of not leaving Anamai's realm until spring.
I can dodge the fetchers. It'll be fine.
I've seen some things, man, and some stuff. Don't go back yet. Just wait.
But then you have like weird.
How are you going to tell time in Anime's realm, Lo?
You don't. I'm assuming
Right.
it's just. I
You
don't
judge.
know.
Judge it by. We just try to wait it near. Find other people that have just come into the anime's realm and be like, "Hey, what was the date when you died?"
Right? Yeah. When did you die, bro? Oh, I don't
Yeah.
know. Something on Hone's Gate or I don't know. I don't know the calendar anymore. On Honeward, yeah, I died 3rd of Honeward. Something like that. He's like, all right, it's time to go, boys. And then everyone charges out of the mortality gates. Poor Kronstock gets flooded by a giant influx of people who didn't even migrate there.
Death refugees,
shit,
yeah.
all the dead came back, man. I have food for this.
Umbwa and Sniper confirming that NPCs will grow from kids to adults, which should be kind of fun to
But
try
being
and
a
trace.
metaphor for
And they will poof.
their psychological development rather than their physical development.
Growing up being a metaphor, not a physical description of the mechanics. So they'll be perpetual children, but they'll have aged in some
Well,
fashion.
honestly, if I had to guess how it works, it's probably like, they go along, either, significant life event does or doesn't happen by approximately the time that they would change model, and then they get taken out of the world for like, a certain duration of time and then reintroduced into the world with their adult mesh and, their adult stuff. And that's probably, I'm going to guess, how the transition takes place. But I don't know, that's some snipe. Oh, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. They go to bed a kid one night and wake up an adult. It's that movie. Oh, what's that movie? The movie with Tom Hanks, where he,
Big.
yeah. Oh man, this is gonna be fun. Creepy fortune teller.
All the old people
Balls
knew the
and
name of
shit.
that movie.
I'm not
Just
that
forgot
old.
Come on. I'm trying to be hip, all right? You
I'm
guys are
just saying,
ridiculous.
I just think it's funny. Rose was saying, so if you murder an NPC child's parents in a dark alley, you could run into that orphan again decades later. But he'd be Batman?
Only if that orphan was rich to begin with, though. And you have to murder.
Butler.
And his parents' last words have to be "Avenge me in flamboyant fashion."
Ombwa was saying that he bets money that at least a player will craft a mask and go full Batman. I didn't know we could craft a Batman mask.
Well, it might not look quite like a Batman mask, but you can be Batman without the Batman suit. You just got to do the
Night
Batman.
Man. Bast man. I'm sure that offends someone. Some gender confusion.
Oh man, Bastman. When all the
Getting
cats,
a little
cats running out in the street, Bastman is here.
Getting a little loopy. Well, it's time to wrap up. I actually think we could spend another hour talking about time,
We could.
and we'll have to revisit this later in the year. Um, Maybe by some other holiday, we might get some ideas of what the less than holidays exist. Um, but yeah, this has been great. I really enjoyed this. So next week we have Calidora and Cadron on to discuss housing. Um, Actually, so we've been talking about having getting the um, chat pulled into on screen, but I'm hoping actually in this area we can put some pics next week from some screenshots from the housing. Calidor has been taking some. Other people have been taking some screenshots now that we have the renovation kits in. Um,
Well, we definitely need the devs at some point to do a nice walkthrough of the estates they're about to drop on us. Right? Right?
Definitely.
I lobby for this. I lobby for this right now. That would be super, super awesome, and it would make those of us who will not ever have an estate or anything to do with them feel just a little bit better, and give us an object of desire and scorn and admiration.
Well, it's been almost a year since the series started last year on the dev fly-throughs, so it's
True.
timely.
I
Sure.
think it would be appropriate if you could stream viewing the estates too in like proper, black tie formal wear.
Oh my
Monocles
gosh,
and
that'd be
top hats
amazing.
would be a must too.
I like Kedron in one of those T-shirts that like has the bib and everything. Right? Just being like, you know, all right, today we're gonna go look through the estates. Our artists have been doing a super good job working on everything. We're very excited to, show this to you today. Oh my god, I'd laugh. I'd be so happy.
Oh yeah. All right, cool.
cool. Well, thanks for showing up, guys.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, we love having you on, Zero. And we will see you next week. Have fun. Have a happy Valentine's Day.
Yep. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Yep.
Take care.
It's a heart, I think.